What would you do if your husband slapped you in front of his entire family and his mother only complained about the timing? For 9 years, Emily shrunk herself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the narrow space her husband's family carved out for her. They called her a housewife with a little hobby. They thought she was weak, dependent, nothing without him. They had no idea. Because while Mark was busy tearing her down, Emily was quietly building an empire worth $150 million right under his nose. Every morning before dawn, every night while he slept. And when he finally crossed the line that Thanksgiving evening, she did not cry. She did not beg. She smiled and whispered two words that would change everything. Thank you. I needed that. What happens next is a masterclass in patience, strategy, and sweet, devastating justice. Stay until the end. Trust me, the courtroom scene will leave you speechless. If stories about women who refuse to stay broken speak to you, you know what to do. Drop a comment, hit that subscribe button, and let us begin. The sound cracked through the dining room like a gunshot. 23 family members, 14 side dishes, one woman's cheek turning red while everyone pretended to study their green beans. Emily Hayes Walker had spent 9 years learning how to be invisible at Walker family dinners. She knew exactly how to smile without showing too much teeth. She knew how to laugh at jokes that were not funny. She knew how to shrink herself small enough to fit into the narrow space her husband's family had carved out for her. But tonight, none of that mattered. She had been in the kitchen helping Mark's elderly grandmother find her reading glasses when the main course was served. By the time she returned to the dining room, everyone else had already received their plates. She moved quickly, efficiently, the way she always did. She placed Mark's plate in front of him exactly 30 seconds after everyone else. 30 seconds. That was all it took. Mark Walker grabbed her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was tight, the kind of tight that leaves fingerprint bruises. Emily felt the familiar rush of fear flood her body, the same fear she had learned to swallow over 9 years of marriage. But this time was different. This time there were witnesses. Mark pulled her close, his breath hot with wine and resentment. His mother Helen sat at the head of the table, watching with the same expression she might use to observe someone spilling gravy on the tablecloth. His father Richard cleared his throat and reached for the cranberry sauce. His sister Grace smirked into her wine glass like she was watching entertainment. And then Mark's hand connected with Emily's face. The slap echoed through the silent room. Emily's head snapped to the side. Heat bloomed across her cheek like fire spreading through dry grass. For a moment, the world went completely still. Helen Walker set down her fork with a small sigh. Mark, not at the table, dear. We have pie coming. That was it. That was all she said. Richard Walker passed the cranberry sauce to his left without looking up. Grace Walker took another sip of wine. Mark's nephew, an 8-year-old boy named Tommy, whispered loudly to his mother, Mommy, why did Uncle Mark hit Aunt Emily? Is that what marriage is? No one answered him. Emily touched her burning cheek with trembling fingers. She could feel every set of eyes in the room carefully avoiding her, studying their plates, their napkins, the chandelier. Anything except the woman standing in the middle of the room with a handprint forming on her face. She had two choices. She could cry. She could run. She could give them exactly what they expected from her. The weak little wife who married above her station and should be grateful for whatever treatment she received. Or she could do something else entirely. Emily lowered her hand from her cheek. She looked at Mark with an expression he had never seen before. It was calm, steady, almost peaceful. Thank you, she whispered. I needed that. Then she sat down in her chair, picked up her fork, and began eating her dinner as if nothing had happened. Mark stared at her with his mouth hanging open. He had expected tears. He had expected begging. He had expected the familiar surrender that always came after he pushed too hard. Instead, he got a woman eating green bean casserole with the composure of someone discussing the weather. For the first time in 9 years, Mark Walker had no idea what to do. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Emily ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each bite. She complimented Helen on the turkey. She asked Richard about his golf game. She smiled at Grace when she passed the rolls. Inside, her mind was racing. Her father had taught her something when she was 12 years old. They had been sitting on the porch of their small house, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. When he said words that would shape the rest of her life. When someone shows you who they really are in public, believe them, but never let them see you break. Break later. Break alone. Break strategically. Walter Hayes had been a simple man, an accountant who drove a used car and wore the same 3 suits in rotation. But he was also the smartest person Emily had ever known. He taught her about money before she could ride a bicycle. He showed her how to read financial statements while other kids were learning to read chapter books. He gave her tools that would save her life. Tonight, those tools were about to be put to use. After dinner, Emily helped clear the dishes. She loaded the dishwasher while Helen supervised and criticized her technique. She dried the good china while Grace made passive-aggressive comments about her dress being from last season. She kissed cheeks and said goodbyes and promised to bring dessert to the next gathering. Then she walked to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds to feel. The tears came fast and silent. Her hands shook against the steering wheel. The pain in her cheek had spread into her jaw, her temple, her soul. 9 years of small cruelties had finally exploded into something undeniable, something public, something that could not be explained away as stress or a bad day or a misunderstanding. 60 seconds. When the minute was over, Emily wiped her eyes, started the car, and drove home through the dark November night. Mark stumbled in 2 hours later, drunk and belligerent. He found Emily in the living room reading a book like it was any other night. "You embarrassed me," he slurred. "Everyone saw you flinch." Emily turned a page. "I am sorry you felt embarrassed." He stood there swaying, waiting for more, waiting for the apology, the tears, the familiar routine of her making herself smaller so he could feel bigger. But Emily just kept reading. Finally, he gave up and staggered to the bedroom. Emily waited until she heard him snoring. Then she set down her book and walked to the guest room, where she kept a laptop hidden in a locked drawer that Mark did not know existed. She opened it and began to type. The screen glowed blue in the darkness as she logged into the administrative portal for Hayes Tech Solutions, the company she had built from nothing over 6 years. The company registered under her maiden name through a trust Mark could not access. The company that had just been valued at $150 million. Mark thought she was a housewife with a little hobby. Mark thought he controlled everything. Mark had no idea. Emily opened her contacts and found the number she needed. Sarah Bennett Collins, her lawyer and her oldest friend. The woman who had helped her build the legal structures that protected everything she owned. The woman who had been waiting for this call for years. Emily typed a simple message and pressed send. Activate everything. Then she closed the laptop, lay down on the guest room bed, and slept better than she had in months. The war was about to begin. To understand what happened next, you need to understand who Emily Hayes Walker really was. Not the woman the Walker family saw. Not the quiet wife who helped with dishes and laughed at bad jokes and never spoke too loudly or took up too much space. That woman was a character Emily had learned to play, a mask she wore to survive. The real Emily was someone else entirely. She woke every morning at 4:47, exactly 13 minutes before her alarm was set to ring. Her body had learned years ago that the early hours before Mark woke were the only safe time, the only space that truly belonged to her. While other women might use that time for exercise or meditation, Emily used it for empire building. She would slip out of bed, careful not to disturb Mark, and pad silently to the guest room. There, hidden in a locked drawer beneath a pile of old sweaters, was a slim silver laptop. She would retrieve it, make herself a cup of coffee, and settle into the chair by the window. Then she would check on her company. Hayes Tech Solutions had started as an idea scribbled on a napkin 6 years ago. Emily had been sitting in a coffee shop, crying quietly into her latte after Mark screamed at her for buying the wrong brand of orange juice, when inspiration struck. She had always been good with numbers. Her father had made sure of that. But she was also good at patterns, at systems, at finding solutions where others saw only problems. She had spent years watching the companies Mark working for make the same mistakes over and over. What if she could build something better? The first year was brutal. She learned to code from online tutorials. She studied business models until her eyes burned. She reached out to contacts from her old job, people who remembered her as sharp and capable before she disappeared into marriage. Sarah Bennett Collins was one of those contacts. They had met in graduate school, Two young women with big dreams and empty bank accounts. Sarah went into law. Emily went into finance. Then Emily met Mark, and everything changed. But Sarah never forgot her friend. When Emily called her with a tentative business idea and a desperate need for confidentiality, Sarah did not hesitate. She helped Emily incorporate under her maiden name. She set up trusts and legal structures that kept everything separate from Emily's marriage. She became not just a lawyer, but a lifeline. Hayes Tech Solutions grew slowly at first. A small contract here, a consulting gig there. Emily worked in the pre-dawn hours and late at night, building something while her husband slept. Mark never asked what she was doing. He assumed it was some boring hobby, something to keep his little wife occupied while he handled the real business of their lives. He had no idea. By year 3, the company had 10 employees working remotely. By year 5, it had 50. By year 6, it had secured 3 rounds of venture funding and was valued at $150 million. Emily owned 92% of it. Every morning she would check the numbers, watch the growth charts, respond to urgent messages from her executive team, who knew her only as E. Hayes, the brilliant but reclusive founder who preferred email to meetings. She had built an entire world in the hours when Mark thought she was doing nothing. But the money was not the point. The point was the door. Her father had taught her about doors when she was 15 years old. They were sitting in his tiny office above the repair shop he ran, surrounded by filing cabinets in the smell of motor oil. "Never let anyone control your exits, Emily," he said. "Always have a door they do not know about. A way out, a place to go, because you never know when you will need to run." At 15, Emily had not understood, but her father had seen something in her future that she could not. He had watched her date boys who were too controlling. He had noticed how she shrank herself to make others comfortable. He had known somehow that his daughter would need an escape route, so he taught her. He taught her about separate bank accounts and prenuptial agreements and the importance of never putting all your eggs in one basket. He taught her about trusts and corporations and the legal shields that could protect what you built. He taught her that love was wonderful, but paperwork was forever. Walter Hayes died 4 years ago, just months after Emily started her company. Cancer took him quickly, mercifully, before he could see what she had built. But in his last days, he held her hand and whispered words she would never forget. "You are stronger than you know, sweetheart. You are smarter than they see of me. And one day when you are ready, you will walk through that door I taught you to build. Promise me you will not wait too long." She had promised. And for 4 years she had waited. Waited for Mark to change. Waited for him to become the man she married, the charming, ambitious man who had swept her off her feet and made her believe in fairy tales. She kept hoping that the good Mark would return, that the cruelty was temporary, that love could fix what was broken. But the slap at Thanksgiving had shattered that hope forever. Mark had not always been cruel. That was what made it so hard. In the beginning, he was everything she dreamed of. Handsome, confident, attentive. He brought her flowers and wrote her love notes and told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Then he lost his job. Then his best friend from college got promoted to a position Mark had wanted. Then his father called him a disappointment to the Walker name during a family argument about money. Something broke inside Mark that year. The man Emily married began to disappear, replaced piece by piece with something colder, something meaner, something that needed to tear others down to feel tall. Emily had watched it happen. She had made excuses, absorbed blame, shrunk herself smaller and smaller to accommodate his growing rage. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself things would get better. She told herself that leaving would make her a failure, a quitter, someone who could not make a marriage work. Her father's voice whispered in her memory, "Do not wait too long." Now sitting in the guest room with her laptop open and her cheeks still throbbing, Emily finally understood. She had waited long enough. The door her father taught her to build was right in front of her. Hayes Tech Solutions, $150 million in assets that Mark could not touch, a life waiting on the other side. All she had to do was walk through. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Received your message. Ready when you are. What is the plan?" Emily typed her response carefully. "First, I need to know what Mark has been hiding. I have found something on his phone." Sarah's reply came immediately. "Tell me everything." Emily began to type. She told Sarah about the messages she had seen on Mark's phone the week before, the text from someone saved as V, the plans to meet up, the casual cruelty of a man who thought his wife was too stupid to notice. She told Sarah about the name she had uncovered. Vanessa Cole, real estate agent, 29 years old, blonde, confident, exactly the type of woman Mark always looked at when he thought Emily was not watching. She told Sarah about Mark's plans to secure the house before divorcing her, his assumption that everything they owned was his complete ignorance of the empire she had built right under his nose. When she finished, Sarah's response was simple. We are going to destroy him, legally, financially, completely. Are you ready? Emily looked at her reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back at her had a fading bruise on her cheek and fire in her eyes. Yes, she typed, I am ready. The game was about to change. Vanessa Cole was having a wonderful Tuesday afternoon until Emily Walker walked through her office door. The real estate office was sleek and modern, all glass walls and motivational posters about success. Vanessa was showing a young couple the listings for a 3-bedroom colonial when she noticed a woman standing in the reception area. Something about her was off. She was well-dressed, professional, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat twist, but her posture was too still. Her eyes were too focused. She looked like someone who had come to deliver news that would change everything. Vanessa finished with the couple, scheduling a follow-up showing for the weekend. Then she walked to reception with her best sales smile firmly in place. Can I help you? The woman did not smile back. I am Emily Walker. I believe you know my husband. The world tilted. Vanessa felt her stomach drop, her face flush, her carefully constructed confidence crumble like a sandcastle in a hurricane. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, usually in the middle of the night when guilt kept her awake. In her imagination, the wife was always hysterical, crying, screaming, throwing things. This woman was none of those things. This woman was terrifying. Perhaps we should talk in private, Emily said. Her voice was calm, pleasant even, like she was suggesting they grab coffee. Vanessa led her to a small conference room on shaking legs. She closed the door and turned to face the woman whose husband she had been sleeping with for 7 months. I know what you are expecting, Emily said, settling into a chair with the ease of someone who had all the time in the world. You are expecting anger, accusations, maybe some hair pulling if things really escalate. That is what happens in the movies, right? Vanessa said nothing. Her mouth had gone completely dry. But I am not here to fight you. Emily folded her hands on the table. I am here to inform you. Inform me of what? Emily smiled. It was not a kind smile. Let me tell you about the man you think you have been dating. For the next 15 minutes, Vanessa's entire understanding of reality collapsed around her. Mark had told her he was successful. A businessman with investments, properties, a wife who was mentally unstable and completely dependent on him. He said he was planning to leave, that he just needed time to untangle his finances, that Vanessa was the first real happiness he had known in years. He lied, Emily said simply, about all of it. What do you mean? The house he lives in? Mine. Bought through a family trust before we were married. The cars he drives? Mine. Registered to my company. The bank accounts that pay for your fancy dinners and hotel rooms? Funded by my income. That is impossible. Vanessa's voice came out as a whisper. He said he was successful. He said he provided everything. Mark has not earned a real paycheck in 4 years. Emily's tone was almost sympathetic. He lost his job and never recovered. Everything you thought was his, every nice restaurant, every gift, every romantic weekend getaway, that was my money. You were not dating a successful man. You were dating my credit one. Vanessa felt sick. She thought about all the times Mark had complained about his ungrateful wife. All the times he had painted himself as the victim of a loveless marriage. All the times she had believed him. He said you were crazy, Vanessa managed, unstable. He said you would fall apart without him. Emily laughed softly. Does this look unstable to you? No, Vanessa had to admit. This looks like someone who has been planning for a very long time. Exactly, Emily stood, smoothing her skirt. Now you have a choice. You can keep seeing him and go down with the ship, or you can walk away and save yourself. I genuinely do not care which option you choose, but I thought you deserved the truth since he never gave it to you. She walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. When this all falls apart, and it will fall apart very soon, remember that I gave you a chance to walk away clean. What happens next is not my fault. Then she was gone. Vanessa sat alone in the conference room for a long time. She thought about the texts she had sent, the plans she had made, the future she had imagined with a man who turned out to be a fiction. She thought about the real woman behind the crazy wife story, a woman who was calm, controlled, and clearly holding all the cards. She thought about her options, and then she made a decision. She picked up her phone and called Mark. Meanwhile, Emily drove home feeling something she had not felt in years: power. For so long, she had been the victim, the target, the woman absorbing blows both physical and emotional. But confronting Vanessa had changed something. She was not hiding anymore. She was not shrinking. She was fighting back. That night, she served Mark dinner with a smile on her face. He was irritable, complaining about problems with his credit card, something about a bank error that would be fixed tomorrow. He had no idea that his cards had been declined because Emily had quietly moved funds, preparing for the separation that was coming. He had no idea about anything. After dinner, Emily retreated to the guest room with her laptop. She had documents to prepare, assets to secure, a life to rebuild. She felt a small flutter of hope in her chest, fragile but real. She thought she was winning. She thought she was safe. She was wrong. The next morning, Emily woke to 47 text messages and 12 missed calls. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the notifications. Messages from unknown numbers. Voicemails from Helen Walker's icy voice. A single devastating text from Sarah. "Call me immediately. Something has gone very wrong." Emily's heart hammered as she dialed. What happened? Sarah's voice was grim. Vanessa did not walk away. She got angry. "At you? What do you mean?" "I mean, she called Mark last night. Told him everything you said. He knows about the money, Emily. He knows about the company. He knows you were planning to leave." The blood drained from Emily's face. But that is not the worst part. Sarah paused. She also called Helen. Emily closed her eyes. Mark's mother, the woman who controlled the Walker family with an iron fist. The woman who had watched her son slap his wife at Thanksgiving and complained about the timing. "Helen is furious," Sarah continued. "Not at Mark, of course. At you. For lying, for hiding money, for daring to have something of your own." Emily's phone buzzed with another incoming call. "Mark. He is calling," she said. "Do not answer. We need to regroup. He is going to come at you hard, Emily. He has already contacted a lawyer, someone his family knows. They are going to try to claim your assets or marital property. They are going to try to take half of everything you built. Can they do that? Probably not. Your legal structures are solid, but they can make your life hell trying." Emily heard the front door slam open downstairs. Mark's voice thundered through the house. "Emily, get down here now. I have to go," Emily whispered. "Do not let him provoke you," Sarah said urgently. "Document everything. Do not admit to anything. I will be there as soon as I can." The call ended. Emily took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked downstairs to face her husband. Mark stood in the living room, his face purple with rage. He looked like a man whose entire worldview had just been shattered. "You think you are smart?" He jabbed a finger at her. "You think you can humiliate me?" Emily kept her voice calm. "Mark, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you have been lying to me for years? That you have some secret company worth millions? That you have been planning to leave me this whole time?" "I was trying to protect myself." "From what?" He stepped closer and Emily automatically stepped back. "I am your husband. Everything you have is mine. That is how marriage works." "Actually, it is not." Emily's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "Texas is a community property state, but assets acquired before marriage or through separate trusts are not automatically community property. My company was incorporated under my maiden name before we were married, and it has been kept completely separate from our marital finances." Mark stared at her like she had grown a second head. "Where did you learn that?" "Where did you learn to talk like that?" "From my lawyer. From my father. From 6 years of building something while you were too busy being cruel to notice." The truth hit Mark like a physical blow. His wife, the quiet little mouse he had dismissed and degraded for years, had been playing a completely different game. And she had been winning. His face twisted. "We will see about that. My lawyer says you hid assets during our marriage. That is fraud." "Masana, I am going to take half of everything you have, maybe more. Emily felt the first crack in her composure. She had planned so carefully. She had protected everything, but she had not planned for Vanessa's betrayal. She had not planned for this. Mark smiled, sensing weakness. You thought you were so clever. You thought you could just walk away and leave me with nothing. But I am going to make sure everyone knows what you really are. A liar, a fraud, a conniving woman who trapped me into marriage and then tried to steal everything. I never stole anything. My company is mine. We will let the courts decide that. Mark's smile widened. Oh, and my mother is calling a family meeting tomorrow. You are going to apologize for your deception. You are going to explain yourself, and then we are going to discuss how to move forward. Emily felt the walls closing in. She had been so close to freedom. Now it was slipping away. The family meeting was not a meeting at all. It was a tribunal. Emily sat in a hardback chair in Helen Walker's formal living room, surrounded by enemies. Mark stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking smug. Helen perched on her throne-like armchair, radiating cold fury. Richard sat silent and uncomfortable in the corner. Grace lounged on the sofa, enjoying the show. Let us be clear about what has happened here. Helen's voice could have frozen water. Emily has been deceiving this family for years. She has hidden money, lied about her activities, and clearly planned to abandon my son while stealing everything she could get her hands on. I did not steal anything. Emily kept her voice steady. I built a company with my own skills and my own time. It has nothing to do with Mark or this family. Nothing to do with us? Helen's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You lived under our son's roof. You ate the food he provided. You enjoyed the lifestyle he gave you. And all the while, you were plotting against him. Emily wanted to scream the truth, that she had paid for the house, that she had funded their lifestyle, that Mark had not provided anything in years. But she remembered Sarah's warning. Do not admit to anything. Do not give them ammunition. I apologize if my business activities caused any confusion, Emily said carefully. But I assure you everything I did was legal and ethical. Grace snorted from the sofa. Legal and ethical? You lied to your husband for 6 years. What part of that is ethical? I did not lie. I simply did not discuss my business with someone who showed no interest in it. Mark stepped forward. She is twisting everything. She always does this. Makes herself the victim when she is the one who has been manipulating everyone. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but a frightened man trying to hold on to power he never truly had. I am not the one who has been sending money to another woman, she said quietly. The room went still. Mark's face drained of color. What did you say? I know about Vanessa. Emily's voice was calm. I know about the dinners, the hotels, the gifts. I know about the $127,000 you have transferred from our joint account over the past 2 years. The account I funded, Helen's eyes narrowed. That is ridiculous. Mark would never. I have the bank statements. Emily pulled out her phone and began scrolling. I have the transaction records. I have screenshots of text messages. Would you like to see them? Silence. Mark's smugness had vanished, replaced by panic. Those accounts, he stammered. Those were for business expenses. Networking. Networking with a real estate agent you have been sleeping with for 7 months? Grace sat up straighter, suddenly much more interested. Wait, Mark has a mistress? This is not relevant. Helen's voice had gone sharp. We are here to discuss Emily's deception, not to air baseless accusations. They are not baseless. Emily stood, suddenly tired of being the defendant. I have evidence of everything, his affair, his financial misconduct, his unauthorized access to my private accounts when he tried to find information about my company. That last one is actually a crime, by the way. Accessing someone's private accounts without permission is a felony in Texas. Mark looked like he might be sick. I was just trying to understand. You were hiding things. I was protecting myself. Emily met his eyes. From exactly this kind of situation. From a man who would hit me at a family dinner and expect me to apologize for flinching. Another silence, heavier than before. That was a misunderstanding. Mark's voice had gone weak. You know I would never really hurt you. Emily touched her cheek, where the bruise had faded but the memory had not. Keep telling yourself that. She gathered her purse and walked toward the door. Where do you think you are going? Helen demanded. We are not finished here, Emily turned back. Yes, we are. I came here hoping we could have a civilized conversation. Instead, I got an ambush. So let me be very clear about what happens next. She looked at each of them in turn. I am filing for divorce tomorrow. I have documented evidence of physical abuse, financial misconduct, and infidelity. My lawyer is one of the best in the state, and my assets are protected by legal structures that your family lawyer does not have the expertise to challenge. If Mark wants a war, I will give him one. But I promise you, I will win. Then she walked out the door. She made it to her car before the tears came. She sat in the parking lot of a grocery store, sobbing into her steering wheel, wondering if she had just made everything worse. She had gone in there trying to maintain control, but she had let her anger slip out. She had revealed her evidence too early. She had warned them what was coming. Her phone rang. Sarah, how did it go? Emily laughed bitterly. Badly. I lost my temper. I told them about the affair, the money, everything. Sarah sighed. Okay, that is not ideal, but it is not a disaster. We can work with this. They are going to fight back. Emily wiped her eyes. Mark's lawyer is already involved. They are going to try to take everything. Let them try. Your structures are solid, Emily. I have built them myself. But you are right that this is going to get ugly before it gets better. Emily looked at the darkening sky. What do I do now? Come to my office. We need to prepare for war. An hour later, Emily sat in Sarah's conference room, surrounded by documents and coffee cups in the wreckage of her marriage. The good news, Sarah said, is that your legal position is strong. Hayes Tech was incorporated before your marriage, funded entirely with your separate property, and kept in a trust that Mark has no access to. In Texas, that makes it your separate estate. And the bad news? The bad news is that Mark has resources. The Walker family has money and connections. They are going to throw everything they have at you, trying to find weaknesses in your structure or paint you as the villain in court. Emily stared at the stack of documents. What are my chances? Sarah leaned back. Honestly, you should win. But should and will are different things. Courts can be unpredictable. Judges can be influenced. And the Walkers are going to play dirty. How dirty? As if in answer, Emily's phone buzzed, a news alert. She opened it and felt her blood run cold. The headline read, Tuamia, Tech CEO's hidden fortune. Husband claims she hid millions while he struggled. Below it was a photo of Emily, looking cold and calculating, next to a photo of Mark, looking sad and victimized. They leaked the story, Sarah said, reading over her shoulder. Already, they are trying to control the narrative. Emily scrolled through the article. It painted her as a scheming woman who had deceived her loving husband. It quoted anonymous sources close to the family describing her as unstable and manipulative. It mentioned her company by name, implying that she had somehow cheated Mark out of his rightful share. This is going to hurt my business, Emily said quietly. My investors, my employees. Sarah nodded grimly. That is probably the point. They cannot beat you in court, so they are trying to destroy you in public. Emily set down her phone. Her hands were shaking. She had thought she was prepared. She had thought her planning would protect her, but she had not anticipated this level of viciousness. She was starting to wonder if she could survive it. The next morning, Emily stood in the lobby of Hayes Tech Solutions for the first time in 3 years. She had always run her company remotely, communicating through email and video calls, never revealing her face or her full identity to most of her employees. But the news story had changed everything. Her board was panicking. 2 major investors were threatening to pull out. The company she had spent 6 years building was at risk. It was time to stop hiding. The receptionist looked up as Emily approached. Can I help you? I am here to see Diane Montgomery. Emily straightened her spine. Tell her E. Hayes is here. The receptionist's eyes went wide. You are E. Hayes? The founder? Emily nodded. Oh my God. The woman grabbed the phone. Ms. Montgomery, you need to come to reception immediately. The founder is here. 3 minutes later, Emily was in a conference room with Diane Montgomery, a silver-haired woman of 55 who had been on her board since the beginning. So you are the mysterious E. Hayes. Diane studied her with sharp eyes. I have to say, I did not expect you to be quite so ordinary looking. Emily almost laughed. I will take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. Diane leaned forward. Now tell me about this media circus surrounding your divorce. Because I have 3 board members who want to sell their shares and 2 investors who are convinced you are some kind of criminal mastermind. Emily told her everything. The abuse, the affair, the Walker family's campaign to destroy her, the legal battle that was just beginning. When she finished, Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something Emily did not expect. I went through something similar. 30 years ago, my husband was a charmer too. Everyone loved him. No one believed me when I said he was a monster behind closed doors. When I finally left, he tried to take my business. Nearly succeeded. What did you do? I found allies. Diane smiled. Women who understood. Women who had been through it themselves. Women who were willing to fight. Emily felt something shift in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or solidarity. Will you help me? Diane reached across the table and took her hand. I will do better than that. I will introduce you to an army. Over the next few days, Emily's army assembled. First came Sarah, working around the clock to prepare their legal strategy. Then came Diane, rallying the board and convincing investors to stay calm. Then came Margaret Sullivan, the housekeeper, who had worked for Emily and Mark for 7 years. She had seen everything. The yelling, the thrown objects, the morning after Thanksgiving when Emily's cheek was swollen and purple. I will testify, Maggie said, her Irish accent thick with determination. I will tell them exactly what kind of man Mark Walker really is. And finally came Charlotte Hayes. Emily's grandmother arrived from Florida on a Tuesday afternoon, striding through the airport like a woman half her age. At 78, Charlotte had the sharp mind of a lawyer and the tongue of a sailor. She had built and lost and rebuilt fortunes. She had survived a cheating husband of her own, and she was absolutely furious. Let me understand this. Charlotte settled into Emily's guest room, which had become the war room for their legal battle. That pathetic excuse for a man hit you in front of his entire family, and his mother complained about the timing? That is correct. And now they are trying to take your company? The company you built while that useless creature was playing video games and chasing other women? That is also correct. Charlotte's eyes blazed. I am going to enjoy watching you destroy them. Despite everything, Emily laughed. Grandma, we are trying to win a legal case, not start a vendetta. Why not both? Charlotte examined the documents spread across the table. Your grandfather was a cheater too, you know. Ran around with every secretary in the county. Know what I did when I found out? Emily shook her head. I waited until he was at his most confident. Then I showed his bank statements to the entire congregation at church. On Easter Sunday, Charlotte smiled at the memory. He never looked at another woman again. Sarah, who had been listening from the doorway, cleared her throat. Mrs. Hayes, with all due respect, we cannot release bank statements at church. Fine. Charlotte waved a hand. What about the country club? Also no, Charlotte sighed. You lawyers are no fun. But beneath the dark humor, Emily could feel strength gathering around her. She was not alone anymore. She had allies, witnesses, an army of women who understood what she had been through. The question was whether it would be enough. That night, Emily sat with Sarah, reviewing their strategy. We have documented abuse. Sarah ticked off points on her fingers. We have financial records showing Mark's misconduct. We have testimony from Maggie about the pattern of behavior. And we have evidence that he illegally accessed your accounts. So we should win? We should. Sarah hesitated. But Mark's family is not playing fair. They have been feeding stories to the press. They have lined up witnesses who will say you are unstable, and they have a therapist ready to testify that Mark was actually the victim of emotional manipulation. Emily felt her stomach drop. A therapist? Someone Mark has been seeing for months, conveniently documenting a narrative that paints him as the poor, misunderstood husband of a cold, calculating woman. That is insane. Emily stood and began pacing. I never manipulated anyone. I was just trying to survive. I know. Sarah's voice was gentle. But courts do not run on truth. They run on evidence and persuasion. We need to be prepared for them to fight dirty. Emily stopped at the window, looking out at the dark night. What are our options? We have one card they do not know about. Sarah pulled out a folder. Remember how I said I was looking into the Walker family finances? Emily turned. What did you find? Sarah opened the folder. Richard Walker's wealth? It is not his. It is Helen's, her family money, and there is more. She slid a photograph across the table. It showed a young man, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair and a familiar jawline. Emily stared at it, confused. Who is this? His name is James Whitmore. Sarah's voice was careful. He is Richard Walker's son from an affair 20 years ago. The Walker family has been paying him hush money ever since. Emily sank into a chair. Mark has a half-brother? One that the Walker family has kept completely secret. One that proves Richard is a hypocrite who has no right to judge anyone else's marriage. Emily looked at the photograph. The young man had Richard's eyes, Mark's jawline, a secret hidden for 2 decades. How do we use this? Carefully, Sarah leaned forward. We do not want to hurt the kid. He did not do anything wrong. But Richard? Richard has been enabling Mark's behavior for years. He watched his son abuse you and said nothing. If we can get him on the stand and confront him with this, it might break him. Break him how? Sarah smiled. Make him tell the truth. Emily stared at the photograph for a long time. She had come into this battle hoping to survive, hoping to escape with her company intact and her dignity preserved. But now she was starting to think she could do more than to survive. She could win. The Hayes Tech Board meeting was supposed to be a disaster. 2 investors had publicly announced they were considering selling their shares. 3 board members had demanded Emily's resignation. The media was having a field day with stories about the secretive founder whose marriage was imploding in spectacular fashion. Emily walked into the conference room expecting a firing squad. Instead, she found Diane Montgomery standing at the head of the table with a smile on her face. Before we begin, Diane announced to the assembled board members, I would like to share some news. This morning, I personally contacted each of our concerned investors. I explained the situation. I shared the documented evidence of Mr. Walker's behavior, and I made them an offer. Emily blinked. What kind of offer? Diane's smile widened. Any investor who wishes to sell their shares can do so immediately, at current valuation, and I will personally buy them. The room went silent. You are bluffing. One of the board members, a gray-haired man named Peterson, leaned forward. That would cost you millions, 47 million to be precise. Diane did not flinch. I have the funds, I have the paperwork, and I have complete confidence in our founder. She turned to Emily. This woman built a company worth $150 million while surviving an abusive marriage. She did it in secret, in the hours before dawn, while everyone around her dismissed her as a housewife with a hobby. If that is not proof of genius, I do not know what is. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. That is all well and good, but the publicity will blow over. Diane cut him off. Scandals always do. What will not blow over is the fundamental strength of this company. Our technology is sound. Our contracts are solid. Our founder is brilliant. Everything else is noise. One by one, the board members looked at each other. Peterson cleared his throat. If Diane is willing to put her own money on the line, I suppose I can wait out the storm. The others nodded in agreement. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so long being invisible, being dismissed, being told she was not good enough. And now this room full of powerful people was betting their futures on her. Thank you, she managed. Diane waved a hand. Do not thank me, just win your case. Meanwhile, Sarah had been busy on the legal front. The divorce filing had triggered a flurry of motions and counter-motions. Mark's lawyer, a slick man named Harrison, who had been friends with the Walker family for years, was throwing every possible obstacle in their path. But Sarah was better. She had obtained records of Mark's unauthorized access to Emily's accounts. She had documented his financial transfers to Vanessa. She had gathered testimony from Maggie about years of verbal and physical abuse. And she had one more card to play. On the morning of the preliminary hearing, Sarah called Emily with news. Richard Walker agreed to testify. Emily nearly dropped her phone. What? How? I may have had a conversation with him, privately, about certain photographs and certain payments to a certain young man in Oklahoma. You blackmailed him? I prefer the term motivated. Sarah's voice was dry. Richard is tired, Emily. Tired of covering for his son. Tired of pretending. I gave him an opportunity to unburden himself, and he took it. What is he going to say? The truth. About Mark, about the family dynamic, about the abuse they all saw and ignored. Emily sat down heavily. This could actually work. It could. But there is a catch. Of course there is. Sarah sighed. Vanessa Cole is going on a podcast tonight, a women's empowerment show of all things. She is going to tell her side of the story, and based on what my sources tell me, she is going to paint you as the villain. Emily closed her eyes. She is going to say I threatened her. Probably. Mark has been coaching her. They have turned her from the other woman into the victim of your manipulation. Can we stop it? No, but we can prepare for it, and we can make sure the courtroom tells a different story. That night, Emily watched the podcast from her grandmother's guest room. Vanessa Cole appeared on screen, looking polished and sympathetic. The host, a woman with 2 white teeth and aggressive empathy, leaned forward eagerly. Tell us what happened, the host said, in your own words. Vanessa took a deep breath. I met Mark at an open house. He seemed so sad, so beaten down. He told me his wife was cold and controlling, that she withheld affection, belittled him, made him feel worthless. Emily's hands clenched into fists. He said he was trying to leave, Vanessa continued, that he was working up the courage. I believed him. I fell in love with him. And then his wife found out? Vanessa nodded. She came to my office. I thought she was going to cry or scream. Instead, she was calm, too calm. She told me Mark had no money, that everything was hers. She said if I did not leave him alone, she would destroy me. The host gasped appropriately. That sounds terrifying. It was, Vanessa dabbed at her eyes. Emily Walker is not a victim. She is a predator. She trapped Mark in a loveless marriage and controlled him with money. He was not her husband. He was her prisoner. Emily turned off the television. Charlotte appeared in the doorway. That woman is a good actress. Almost believed her myself. Emily shook her head. It does not matter what she says on podcasts. It matters what happens in court. Charlotte sat beside her. You know, when I was fighting your grandfather, there was a moment when I almost gave up. Everyone believed his version of events, the church, the neighbors, even my own mother. I thought there was no point in fighting. What changed? I remembered something my mother told me before she died. Charlotte's voice was soft. She said the truth is patient. It does not need to win every battle. It just needs to win the last one. Emily looked at her grandmother. Do you really believe that? Charlotte smiled. I believe in you, and I believe that man is about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Emily nodded slowly. Tomorrow was the preliminary hearing. Tomorrow, the truth would finally have its day. The Harris County Courthouse had seen a lot of drama in its 100-year history, but rarely anything quite like the Walker divorce. The gallery was packed, journalists, family members, curious onlookers who had followed the scandal in the news. Emily walked in flanked by Sarah and Diane, her grandmother following close behind. Mark was already seated at the opposing table with his lawyer Harrison. He looked confident, even smug. Helen sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing an expression of icy disapproval. Grace was beside her, scrolling through her phone with studied boredom. Richard was notably absent. All rise, the bailiff announced, the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. The judge entered, a stern-faced woman in her 60s who had a reputation for cutting through nonsense. She settled into her chair and looked over the courtroom with sharp eyes. We are here for preliminary matters in the case of Walker versus Walker, she said. I have reviewed the initial filings from both sides. Before we proceed, I want to make something clear. I have no patience for grandstanding, media manipulation, or anything that wastes this court's time. Are we understood? Both lawyers nodded. Good. Mr. Harrison, you may begin. Mark's lawyer stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, my client is the victim of a years-long campaign of deception and emotional abuse. His wife concealed significant assets during their marriage, depriving him of his legal rights as a spouse. We are seeking equitable distribution of all marital assets, including the business known as Hayes Tech Solutions. Sarah stood. Your Honor, respondent's characterization is completely false. Hayes Tech Solutions was incorporated before the marriage using Ms. Hayes' separate property. It has been maintained as her separate estate throughout the marriage with complete documentation. Under Texas law, it is not subject to division. Judge Morrison looked at the stacks of documents in front of her. I have reviewed the corporate filings. They appear to support Ms. Collins's position. Mr. Harrison, what is your argument? Harrison smiled. Our argument, Your Honor, is that while the technical structure may suggest separate property, the reality is that Miss Walker used marital resources to support her business. She worked on it during the marriage, which means her labor was a marital contribution. With respect, Sarah interjected, that is not how Texas law works. A spouse's labor during marriage does not automatically convert separate property to community property, especially when the business was funded entirely with separate funds and maintained in separate accounts. Judge Morrison nodded. I am inclined to agree with Ms. Collins on this point. However, I will reserve final judgment for the trial. What else? Harrison's smile faltered slightly. We also have evidence that Miss Walker was emotionally abusive during the marriage. We have testimony from a licensed therapist who treated Mr. Walker and documented signs of manipulation and control. Sarah stood again, and we have evidence that Mr. Walker physically assaulted my client at a family gathering in front of multiple witnesses. We have testimony from a household employee documenting years of verbal abuse. We have financial records showing Mr. Walker diverted over $127,000 from a joint account to fund an extramarital affair. The gallery stirred. Helen's face went pale. We also have evidence, Sarah continued, that Mr. Walker illegally accessed my client's private accounts without authorization. This is a felony under Texas law. Harrison stood quickly. Those accusations are baseless. Mr. Walker was simply trying to understand his family's finances. Any husband would do the same. Any husband does not have the legal right to hack into his wife's private accounts. Sarah's voice was sharp. The unauthorized access is documented with timestamps and IP addresses. We are prepared to present this evidence to the court. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Both of you, enough. I have heard sufficient argument for today. We will schedule a full evidentiary hearing. She looked at her calendar. 1 month from today, both parties should be prepared to present their full cases. And I want to make something very clear. She looked directly at Harrison. If I see any more media manipulation or attempts to try this case in the press, there will be consequences. The courtroom is where we determine truth, not the evening news. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. The hearing ended. Emily walked out of the courthouse with her heart pounding. It was not a victory, not yet, but it was not a defeat either. The judge seemed fair. The legal arguments were on her side. 1 month. 1 month until everything would be decided. That night, Emily found Richard Walker waiting in the lobby of her attorney's office. He looked older than she remembered, smaller. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame, and his eyes were tired. I need to talk to you, he said quietly. Emily glanced at Sarah, who nodded. 5 minutes. They went into a small conference room. Richard sat heavily in a chair, not looking at her. I am going to testify, he said, against Mark. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Emily studied him. Why am I? Because I am tired. Richard finally met her eyes. I have spent my entire life pretending I was successful when I married into money, pretending I was a good father when I let my son become a monster, pretending I did not see what was happening to you. He looked down at his hands. I watched Mark hit you at Thanksgiving. I saw your face afterward, and I did nothing. I told myself it was not my place, that marriages are complicated, that you probably provoked him somehow. Emily felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. And now I see James. Richard's voice cracked. My other son, the one I abandoned. He grew up without a father because I was too much of a coward to claim him. And he turned out fine. Better than fine. He is in college, studying to be a teacher. He has never hit anyone in his life. He looked up at Emily with wet eyes. I failed 2 families. I cannot undo that. But I can stop failing now. I can tell the truth about what I saw, what Mark is, what we all let him become. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. If you testify honestly, you will destroy your relationship with Helen, with Grace, with your whole family. I know. They will never forgive you, I know. Richard stood, looking suddenly older than his 70 years. But maybe that is the price of finally telling the truth. He walked to the door, then paused. For what it is worth, Emily, I am sorry. I should have stopped him years ago. Then he was gone. Emily sat alone in the conference room processing what had just happened. The trial was 1 month away, and she finally had the weapon she needed to win. The morning of the trial, Emily woke before dawn. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mark's face, Helen's cold stare, the headlines that had painted her as a villain. The weight of the last few months pressed down on her chest like a physical thing. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw something else. A woman who had survived. A woman who had built an empire in secret. A woman who was finally ready to fight. Her grandmother was waiting in the kitchen with coffee. "Today is the day," Charlotte said. "How do you feel?" Emily accepted the cup. "Terrified, but also ready," Charlotte nodded. "Good. That is exactly how you should feel." The courtroom was even more packed than before. The media attention had only grown as the trial approached. Journalists jockeyed for seats. Family members filled the gallery. The air crackled with anticipation. Emily took her seat beside Sarah, keeping her face calm despite her racing heart. Mark sat across the aisle, looking confident in his tailored suit. Harrison whispered something in his ear, and Mark smiled. Helen was in her usual spot in the gallery. Grace was beside her. Richard was nowhere to be seen. Yet, Judge Morrison entered and everyone rose. "We are here for the full evidentiary hearing in Walker versus Walker," she announced. "I have reviewed all submitted materials. We will begin with petitioner's case. Mr. Harrison, proceed." Harrison stood, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, this case is about a woman who systematically deceived and manipulated her husband for nearly a decade. Emily Walker hid millions of dollars from her spouse. She controlled their finances. She denied him affection and undermined his confidence. And when he finally tried to stand up for himself, she turned him into a villain." He gestured dramatically. "We will present testimony from Dr. William Crawford, a licensed therapist who treated Mark Walker. He will describe a pattern of emotional abuse that left my client a shell of himself. We will show that Emily Walker is not a victim. She is a predator." Emily kept her face neutral, but inside she was seething. The lies were so bold, so brazen, it took her breath away. "Ms. Collins?" Judge Morrison turned to Sarah. Sarah stood calmly. "Your Honor, we will present evidence that directly contradicts Mr. Harrison's narrative. We have documented physical abuse, including an incident witnessed by 23 people at a family Thanksgiving dinner. We have financial records showing Mr. Walker diverted over $127,000 to fund an extramarital affair. We have digital evidence of unauthorized access to my client's private accounts. And we have testimony from witnesses who have observed Mr. Walker's behavior over many years." She paused. "The truth, Your Honor, is simple. Emily Walker built a successful business through her own intelligence and hard work. Mark Walker contributed nothing to that business. When he discovered its existence, he tried to take it from her by force, both physical and legal. This case is not about protecting a victim. It is about a bully trying to steal what he could not build." Judge Morrison nodded. "Call your first witness." Harrison called to Crawford, the therapist. Crawford was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and an air of professional concern. He described treating Mark for months, documenting what he called signs of emotional manipulation and psychological control. "Mark presented as someone whose self-esteem had been systematically destroyed," Crawford said. "He blamed himself for everything wrong in his marriage. That is classic victim behavior." Sarah's cross-examination was surgical. "Dr. Crawford, did Mark Walker ever mention to you that he was having an affair?" Crawford blinked. "That was not the focus of our sessions. Did he mention that he had physically struck his wife at a family gathering?" "He described the incident differently." "Differently how?" Crawford shifted uncomfortably. "He said his wife had provoked him, that she had been withholding and cold, that he lost control for a moment but immediately regretted it. So he admitted to hitting her?" "He admitted to a single incident of regrettable behavior during a high-stress moment." Sarah nodded. "And in all your sessions, did you ever interview Emily Walker? Did you ever get her side of the story? That is not standard practice. So your diagnosis of her as a manipulator is based entirely on what Mark told you?" Crawford's face reddened. "I am a trained professional who never spoke to the alleged abuser." Sarah let that hang in the air. No further questions. Next came Vanessa Cole, who told her story of being threatened by Emily at her office. She was convincing, Sarah had to admit, a good actress with a sympathetic story. But Sarah was ready. Ms. Cole, you testified that Emily Walker threatened to destroy you. What were her exact words? Vanessa hesitated. She said if I kept seeing Mark, I would go down with the ship. Go down with the ship, Sarah repeated. That sounds less like a threat and more like a warning. A prediction that Mark's situation was about to collapse. She was intimidating me, or she was telling you the truth about the man you thought you were dating. Sarah pulled out documents. Ms. Cole, were you aware that Mark Walker had no independent income for the past 4 years? That is not true. I have bank records here showing that every deposit into Mark Walker's accounts came from his wife's business income. Sarah handed copies to the judge. Every dinner he bought you, every hotel room, every gift, it was Emily Walker's money. Did Mark tell you that? Vanessa's composure cracked. He said he was successful. He said he had investments. He lied. Sarah's voice was not unkind. You were not the first person Mark Walker deceived, and you will not be the last. The morning wore on. Harrison presented his case, building a picture of Emily as cold and calculating. Sarah methodically dismantled each argument. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. We call Richard Walker to the stand, Sarah announced. A ripple went through the gallery. Helen half rose from her seat, face white with shock. Grace grabbed her arm. Mark spun around, confusion and betrayal on his face. Dad, what is happening? Richard Walker walked into the courtroom looking like a man who had not slept in weeks. He took the stand and was sworn in, his hand trembling on the Bible. Sarah approached gently. Mr. Walker, can you describe your relationship with your son, Mark? Richard swallowed. I love my son, but I have not always done right by him, or by his wife. Can you elaborate? Richard looked at Emily for the first time. I watched my son become someone I did not recognize. Angry, cruel, entitled. And I said nothing because it was easier to look away. Did you witness the incident at Thanksgiving dinner? Yes, Richard's voice broke. I saw Mark hit Emily. I saw her face afterward. And I sat there and said nothing because I was a coward. The gallery was completely silent. Did you ever see other incidents of abuse? Richard nodded slowly. Verbal, emotional, things he said to her that no man should say to his wife. I told myself it was not my business. That marriages are complicated, but I knew. We all knew. Helen rose from her seat. Richard, what are you doing? Stop this right now. Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. Mrs. Walker, you will sit down and remain silent, or you will be removed from this courtroom. Helen sat, her face a mask of fury. Sarah continued, Mr. Walker, why are you testifying today? Richard looked at his son, then at his wife, then at Emily. Because I am tired of lies. Because I spent my whole life pretending to be something I am not. A successful man who earned his own money. A faithful husband. A good father. His voice cracked. The truth is, I married into money and pretended it was mine. I had an affair and abandoned a child I should have raised. I watched my son become an abuser and said nothing. He met Emily's eyes. I failed you, Emily. I failed everyone. But I can at least tell the truth now, even if it destroys everything. Harrison jumped up. Your Honor, this is clearly rehearsed testimony designed to manipulate. Judge Morrison held up a hand. I will determine what testimony is credible. Continue, Miss Collins. Sarah nodded to Richard. No further questions. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Richard Walker stepped down from the stand. Mark was staring at his father with something between rage and disbelief. Helen looked like she might have a stroke. Grace had stopped scrolling through her phone. Everything was about to change. The rest of the trial passed in a blur. Maggie Sullivan testified about years of abuse, her Irish accent steady as she described what she had witnessed. The yelling, the thrown objects, the morning after Thanksgiving, when Emily's cheek was swollen and purple. I have worked for many families, Maggie said. I know what happens behind closed doors. Emily Walker is not a villain. She is a survivor. Emily herself took the stand and told her story. The years of trying to make her marriage work, the secret company she built as an escape route, the slap that finally broke her. I stayed too long, she admitted. I kept hoping he would become the man I married. But that man was gone, if he ever existed at all. Harrison tried to paint her as calculating, but Emily's quiet dignity made his attacks look petty. By the end, even some of the journalists were nodding along with her testimony. The closing arguments were brief. Mark Walker is not a victim, Sarah said. He is a man who took everything his wife gave him and demanded more, who hit her when she was too slow serving his dinner, who cheated on her with another woman while spending her money. He does not deserve half of what Emily built. He deserves nothing. Harrison stuck to his narrative of the manipulative wife, but his heart did not seem to be in it anymore. Richard's testimony had changed everything. Judge Morrison retreated to her chambers to consider her verdict. The wait was agony. Emily sat with Sarah and her grandmother, trying not to watch the clock. Mark huddled with Harrison, looking progressively more nervous. Helen had left the courtroom after Richard's testimony and had not returned. Finally, after 3 hours, the judge came back. I have considered all the evidence presented in this case, Judge Morrison began. The claims made by both parties, the testimony of witnesses, the documented record. She looked at Mark. Mr. Walker, I find your version of events to be inconsistent, self-serving, and contradicted by substantial evidence. The testimony of your own father, your former housekeeper, and the documented financial records paint a clear picture of a marriage characterized by your controlling behavior, your infidelity, and your financial misconduct. Mark's face went pale. Judge Morrison turned to Emily. Mrs. Walker, I find that Hayes Tech Solutions is your separate property, acquired before your marriage and maintained with your separate funds. Mr. Walker has no legal claim to any portion of it. Additionally, the joint account that he systematically drained is funded by your income, and his unauthorized access to your private accounts constitutes a violation of Texas law. She straightened the papers in front of her. Therefore, I order the following. The marriage of Emily Hayes Walker and Mark Walker is hereby dissolved. All assets identified as separate property, including Hayes Tech Solutions, remain the sole property of Emily Hayes Walker. Mark Walker shall receive no portion of these assets. Mark Walker shall repay the $127,000 improperly diverted from the joint account. A permanent restraining order is issued prohibiting Mark Walker from contacting Emily Hayes Walker or approaching her residence or place of business. She looked up. Additionally, I am referring evidence of potential criminal conduct to the district attorney's office for review. This includes the documented assault at Thanksgiving and the unauthorized access to private accounts. She set down her gavel. This case is closed. The gallery erupted. Emily sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. She had won, completely, utterly won. Sarah hugged her. Diane wiped tears from her eyes. Charlotte pumped her fist in the air like a woman 60 years younger. Across the aisle, Mark stood in shock. Harrison was already packing his briefcase, clearly eager to distance himself from the disaster. No, Mark said, his voice rising. No, this is not fair. He pushed past his lawyer and stormed toward Emily. You did this. You planned this from the beginning. You trapped me. 2 bailiffs intercepted him before he could get close. He struggled against them, face contorted with rage. Emily, you cannot do this. I made you. I gave you everything. Emily stood slowly. She walked toward him, stopping just out of arm's reach. The courtroom went silent. You gave me nothing, Mark. Emily's voice was steady, clear, strong enough to carry to every corner of the room. You gave me criticism. You gave me bruises. You gave me loneliness in my own home. You gave me the constant feeling that I was never good enough, never quiet enough, never small enough for you. She took a breath. You know what you did not give me? A single reason to stay. Mark's struggles weakened, his face crumpled. But I want to thank you for one thing. Emily's voice softened. You taught me that I do not need someone else to feel powerful. I just needed to stop pretending I was not. Then she turned and walked out of the courtroom. Mark screamed her name. The bailiffs held him back. Helen rushed in, demanding answers. Grace was recording everything on her phone. Emily did not look back. She walked through the courthouse doors into bright afternoon sunlight. Sarah was beside her. Diane, Maggie, and Charlotte waited on the steps. How do you feel? Charlotte asked. Emily looked up at the sky, feeling the warmth on her face. Free, she said. I feel free. She reached up and slowly removed her wedding ring, looked at it for a long moment, then walked to a donation box near the courthouse entrance, one that collected for a domestic violence shelter. She dropped the ring inside. Then she turned to face her army of women, the people who had believed in her when she could barely believe in herself. "Let us go home," she said, and together they walked into the future. 6 months later, Emily stood on the deck of her new house, watching the sun set over the ocean. The cottage was small, nothing like the mansion she had shared with Mark. But it was hers, truly hers, chosen and purchased with her own money for her own reasons. She came here every evening now, watching the waves roll in, feeling the salt air on her face. It was her ritual, her reminder that she had survived. A lot had changed in 6 months. Hayes Tech Solutions had not just survived the scandal, it had thrived. The publicity brought attention, and attention brought investors. The company was now valued at $300 million, double what it had been worth when the divorce began. Emily had given her first public interview, telling her story on a national morning show. The response had been overwhelming. Thousands of women wrote to her, sharing their own stories of surviving abuse, of building businesses in secret, of finding the strength to leave. She had started a foundation to help them. It funded legal services, business training, and emergency housing for women escaping abusive relationships. She named it after her father, the Walter Hayes Foundation for New Beginnings. Mark was not doing as well. The criminal case had resulted in a plea deal, 18 months of probation, community service, and mandatory anger management therapy. He was living in his parents' basement now, or rather, his mother's basement. Helen had finally confronted Richard about his testimony, and about his affair, and about James Whitmore. Richard had moved out. The Walker family empire was crumbling. Emily did not gloat. She did not feel satisfaction in Mark's downfall. She simply felt relief that it was over, that she never had to see him again, that she could finally live her own life. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Congratulations. Just saw the news. Hayes Tech officially hit $300 million. Drinks tonight?" Emily smiled and typed back, "Only if Grandma can come. She has earned it." Charlotte Hayes had returned to Florida, but she visited often. She had become something of a celebrity herself, the fierce grandmother who had supported her granddaughter through the worst trial of her life. She was writing a memoir. Working title, How to Survive a Cheating Husband and Other Life Lessons. The doorbell rang. Emily walked inside to find Diane Montgomery on her doorstep, holding a bottle of champagne and a package. $300 million, Diane announced, walking in and heading straight for the kitchen. "I knew you could do it. You had more confidence than I did. That is why you need people like me." Diane found glasses and began pouring. "Now open the package." Emily unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph. A newspaper clipping from 20 years ago showing a young woman accepting an award for entrepreneurial excellence. The woman had Emily's eyes, Emily's smile. Emily looked up, confused. "That is my mother," Diane said. "She built her first company when I was 5 years old. Everyone told her she was crazy. A woman running a business? Impossible. What happened to her?" Diane smiled. "She sold it for $200 million and retired to Spain. I spent my childhood watching her prove everyone wrong." Emily touched the photograph. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because she would have loved you." Diane raised her glass. She always said the best entrepreneurs are the ones who build in secret, the ones who let everyone underestimate them, the ones who prove their worth with results, not words. Emily raised her own glass. "To the ones who build in secret. To the ones who build in secret." They drank. Later that night, after Diane had left and the champagne bottle was empty, Emily walked back out to the deck. The moon had risen over the ocean. The waves were silver and black. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear music from a beach party. She thought about everything that had brought her here. The years of abuse, the secret company, the slap that changed everything, the trial that exposed the truth. She thought about her father who had taught her to always have a door, her grandmother who had shown her how to fight, Sarah and Diane and Maggie who had believed in her when she could barely believe in herself. She thought about the woman she had been 9 years ago, young, hopeful, believing that love would be enough, believing that if she just tried harder, was just a little bit better, everything would work out. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone different, someone stronger, someone who had learned the hardest lesson there is. You cannot love someone into being good. You cannot shrink yourself small enough to make an angry person calm. You cannot build a life on the foundation of someone else's cruelty, but you can build a life on your own foundation. You can create something that belongs only to you. You can find people who see you clearly and love you anyway. You can survive. Emily's phone buzzed one more time. A message from an unknown number. Ms. Hayes, this is James Whitmore, Richard Walker's son. I know this is strange, but I wanted to thank you. What you did at the trial gave my father the courage to finally acknowledge me. We are building a relationship now. For the first time in my life, I have a father. Because of you. Emily read the message 3 times, then she looked up at the stars and smiled. Her father used to say that the best victories are the ones that create ripples, that help people you never expected to help, that change the world in small ways you might never see. She had gone into that courtroom fighting for herself, but somehow along the way, she had given a 19-year-old boy a father. She had shown thousands of women that survival was possible. She had proven that quiet strength could defeat loud cruelty. She had changed things. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her company. Congratulations! Hayes Tech has officially been valued at $300 million. Emily laughed softly. Then she typed a response to James Whitmore. You are welcome, and if you ever need anything, anything at all, you know where to find me. She put the phone away. The waves rolled in. The moon climbed higher. Somewhere out there, a new day was beginning. Emily closed her eyes and remembered her father's voice. Strength is not loud, Emily. It is consistent. It shows up even when people do not notice. And one day when you are ready, the world will finally see what I have always known. You were never small. You were just being patient. Emily opened her eyes. I am not patient anymore, she whispered to the ocean, to the stars, to the memory of everyone who had ever told her she was not enough. Now I am just free. 3 months later, Emily received a letter from an unknown law firm, Harrison and Pierce Attorneys at Law. Dear Ms. Hayes, our client, who wishes to remain anonymous, has information regarding additional fraudulent activities within the Walker family that may be of interest to you. Should you wish to pursue this matter, please contact us at your earliest convenience. Emily read it twice, raised an eyebrow, smiled. Looks like the Walker family has more secrets, she said to herself. But that is a story for another time. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you have learned. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.